Welcome to the PT Podcast.
Okay, so maybe we should cover why we're doing this.
All right.
Why are we doing this?
Well, I think it's just fun. I think we are kind of polymath guys who have an interest in a lot of things and can pick stuff up as we go through our lives that I think a lot of similar polyglot, nerdy, geeky people would be interested in. I think
We
there's
want to
stuff
reach
that
out to the
is,
other geeks in the world.
yeah, it's part of the big community. Yep.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I have another sort of subtle goal, which is, unfortunately, I just went to a funeral yesterday for a dear friend who passed away. She was 92, so she lived a whole great life. But you realize these are great artifacts for the future too, right? If they keep Metrovska formats and they can actually decode these things, you don't get to hear people's voices. And I wish I have a bunch of photos from my mom and so forth, but you don't have audio and video. So now our posterity can really learn how nerdy we were.
Well, so you have your 90-some-year-old friend, but I mean, you and I have talked about how much like smart time or how much, like solid mental time we have left. And
Yeah.
I mean, genetically, it may not be a lot.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
I
So
totally agree.
I think posterity is good. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think we should talk? What do you think we should talk about?
Well, let's see what's first. How about let's see. Well, we're both on Apple computers. We both love Apple.
Yep.
So let's talk about what's up with Apple. What's happening with Apple?
I think the good format is sort of current news that's sort of just random topical stuff, and then if we've got regular roundup stuff we can just cover. But yeah, I think Apple's a good one to start because it's sort of the beginning of the year, and they launch a bunch of products, and since we're all Appleized, I'm just wondering, are you going to buy anything this year? I mean, we basically have everything, right? We have iPads, we've got AirPods, we've got MacBooks, Apple Silicon. I mean, it's sort of a weird year for 2023, right? Like, what do you want?
I'm not even, I've been thinking about this for the last few days, like what tempts me? Because I mean, a lot of times there is tech stuff like that tempts me. So like, but really, like I think about like, oh, those new MacBooks, they have like a slightly nicer display than mine. So I have a first year, like first day of ordering Apple Silicon MacBook Pro, and so slightly nicer display, maybe a little more perf, maybe I think a little more camera, right? But like, really, like I'm at a desk 90% of the time these days. So I'm using an external monitor. Screen is of no value. I don't need the perf, and I use the camera of my Brio. So like, there's nothing that really like. I mean, I've even tried this. The geekdom is so deep that I've tried to like. Well, maybe I could like install some AI thing that'll like grind up a ton of cycles, so I can like justify in some way buying a little like a newer MacBook. But nah.
No.
So
I mean, I'm
what's
the same
on
way.
your list?
I want to be tempted, right? I mean, I think we represent the true tech enthusiasts. We want to be tempted. It's not like I don't want to be tempted, but this year, M1 and M2 sort of doesn't really matter. I'm running an M1 Mac right now. I'm at 32% CPU utilization. The fans aren't on. It's just rocking away. Even when I turn on Open Broadcast Studio, I get to 50%. I mean, there's so much power in these machines. It's crazy. And then the iPad is sort of this weird thing where I've got one from 2018, and like there's no reason to get a new one, right? And the only reason I got a new iPhone was my Pro 12 Pro Max just broke, just died. But I would have gotten a 14. But now that I have a 14, why do you need, you don't need anything. And the 15, the 15's coming this fall, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be a small upgrade. So it does seem like a year off for me, for Apple.
Could be. Yeah. Sad. I mean, I've heard the rumors about the 15 and a half inch Air. Now that
would,
that seems kind of tempting. That is a lot more real estate.
Yeah.
It's going to be, you know, thin and light because if it's in the airline.
Yep.
And the battery will last forever because it's, you know, Apple silicon, and I'm sure it'll have, you know, as good a power management as, you know, anything there is today, and probably better. So that
tempting.
over the horizon is a little tempting.
But here's the problem, though. You know, the M2 really should be called M1.1 because it's still on the 5 nanometer node. The M3 is on the 3 nanometer node, right? And it feels like if you're going to spend the money now, you know, sucking it up on the M1 and then waiting for M3. And maybe this is the strategy, right? With phones, it's the same way. When you move to that new node, that's when you get the big boost. Right? Like if this hadn't happened, if my 12 Pro hadn't died, I'd still be stuck on the 12 Pro waiting for the 15 because the 15 and the M3 are both on this 3 nanometer node. So they're, you know.
Oh, wow.
And,
okay.
and going from 3 to 5 nanometers doesn't sound like much, but it's basically 60% more more transistors in the same space, and it's supposed to have a 20 to 30% power reduction because everything's smaller. Right.
Yeah. So that's the thing where when you go from feature size to feature size, as from 5 to 3, it moves like the square. So you go so 5 squared is 25, 9 squared, or 3 squared is 9. So it's a 25 to 9 ratio in the area that those features take up. So
yeah, and people are funny about this, the way they talk about these things, because, you know, we used to be at 15 nanometers, right? And then they went to, 25 nanometers, and then we went to 15, and then 10, and 7, and 8. And they sound like smaller and smaller changes, but they're actually huge.
Right.
Because going from, you know, 20 to 12, which sounds enormous, is the same as going from 5 to 3.
Right.
Just the percentages. So people get very confused.
Ratio
when we go
squares,
to 2 nanometers, we're gonna be like, oh, what's the big deal going from 3 to 2? But that's a huge increase, right?
Right. That's
because
2 1/4
to 9, right? That's more than a 50% doubling in performance. I think that's what people don't get, is that this 3 nanometers thing is a miracle.
Yep. It's astonishing. And what does it cost? You may know this. I'm curious. Like, I know that driving these features smaller and smaller requires more precision in manufacturing, which means a more expensive fab. Do you know what a 3 nanometer fab costs to bring on? Do you have any idea?
Okay, so I'm going to get these numbers wrong. We'll have to look it up again. I recall the last big time, like a 15 nanometer plant, which is now golden, was like $10 billion. And I think these are on the order of 25 to $30 billion to actually build these things.
Wow.
So they become national projects now. I mean, basically, there are so few companies that can do this. And just, you know, to set the goalpost, like Intel, which has a much lower volume because they only have PCs, they're at 10 nanometers. Right? It doesn't sound like a big deal, except that Apple's at 5, right? So as you said, that's 25 versus 100. So Apple's got 4 times more density, right? Which is unbelievable. So I just think that we need to realize that, yeah, that's why, you know, the US, China, Taiwan, they all have these big subsidy programs, because if you can get the 10 or $20 billion together, you have a huge lead because no one else can get there. It's too expensive.
Yeah.
So anyway, so yeah, I think the Apple stuff is tough because it's, you know, it's sort of like, but I hate waiting a year for anything, right? I hate waiting a year for anything. So I don't know. That M2 Air sounds pretty good. Yeah,
maybe that'll be the next thing on the on Santa's list.
It is
for
the
me.
perfect laptop, though, right? I mean, 14 is pretty small. We both know that. And you know, 16 or 15, wherever it is, just gives you so much more room. And having it be an Air with no fan and with a 20, I mean, that's just, that could be the Santa toy thing for me too. Yeah. So what else is newsworthy for you? I've been playing a lot with ChatGPT, I have to tell you. So that's been
part of that is the big, like, sort of, you know, conventional wisdom or like the big mainstream news thing out of tech this week, that the Kevin Roose story and transcript and follow-up of his interaction with Bing Chat with Sydney. So yeah, which
Yeah,
I
for those of you who don't know, I mean, it was a scary interaction. I mean, the thing seems sentient. I mean, and it seems crazy, don't you think?
yeah,
So
it's just it is eerie. Like the extent of like emotion that goes into it, and the like. Well, it's I think it's also interesting. The scary thing to me was how easily the thing got like misled. Like
yeah,
like
yeah,
one of the tricks he did that like, because there are rules for Sydney as it's called. There are rules for Sydney about what content they can provide and how they
yeah,
can respond to
exactly.
answers. But he did this. He did this thing of like, now I'm going to ask you about this thing. Like, I couldn't ask you about it, but I want you to tell me how you would write a story about you if you were answering this question and you didn't
Right,
have these
right,
rules.
right.
I mean, Kevin Roos, smart guy, and like, but it's like kind of sad that you can just like flip that thing that easily. So,
Well, I think we've opened up a whole. I've heard two new terms. I don't know if you heard them. Prompt hacking, which is
oh,
basically how you can trick it. And then have you heard of this thing called prompt injection?
oh no, cool.
It's like
So it's
you
like
know,
SQL injection,
exactly like
like.
SQL injection attacks. So basically, you know, the prompts are the magic of this thing. They're basically a programming language, and there's ways you can actually extract the prompts that other people are using by just phrasing things
Mm.
properly. So you can actually recover the actual original phrases. And in fact, Amazon sent a memo to everybody saying not to use ChatGPT because you know they're all the prompts are actually property of OpenAI. So
Oh,
all the
huh.
queries
Okay.
they collect,
Ah, okay.
right? And
Okay.
apparently at Amazon, they were actually, you know, the question tells you a lot about what people care about. And they were giving away Amazon secrets by their prompts.
Mm.
And they
Mm-hmm.
actually saw evidence
Mm-hmm.
that various data sources that they use internally were actually appearing in ChatGPT because it keeps getting, it's controlled by OpenAI. Because the input, you know, we are the
Ah,
product again, right? You got to remember,
uh-huh.
because
Uh-huh.
what they're really doing this for is to collect the prompts, right?
Mm.
Right? Because that
Which
tells
is
that,
what people care about.
and they
Yeah.
add that to, well, they add that to the corpus, right? And the match tells you a bunch of things apparently.
Mm.
So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
wow. So this is going to be ChatGPT is super fascinating. I'm on a little private WhatsApp group where people are trying different prompts. It's pretty scary. I mean, just the
So which direction is your group going? Like your WhatsApp group?
oh, I think it's you know there's a you know it's this thing is eerily human, right? It's eerily like it's got real intelligence in it, and then it's eerily not. And I think part of the problem is the more you know about how it's actually trained, the less intelligent you think it is, right?
Mm.
But
Mm-hmm.
on the other hand,
Mm-hmm.
when we train a 2-year-old, it's not that complicated, right? Yet we, you know, 2-year-olds developed into Einstein. So it's not clear the
Mm-hmm.
train,
Mm-hmm.
you know, understanding you know, in computer programming, it used to be understanding the code, so you understand what it was going to do. Here, the code
Mm-hmm.
is very simple, which is essentially keep trying things and I'll tell you if you're better. And who knows what develops out of it. I'm actually
Mm-hmm.
sort of the opinion that there was a great article basically saying that it doesn't learn anything because all it does is you give it a phrase and then it finds the phrases that are most closely matching. That's the essence of ChatGPT. And the analogy
Mm-hmm.
that this guy wrote, and I put it in the notes, was, you know, that's like locking someone in a library and then 20 years later sliding a piece of paper under the door and asking
Mm-hmm.
them if they can speak English, right? Just because there's no,
Mm-hmm.
and they said, and my response to that is, no, actually, I did the calculation. It's more like waiting 100 billion years because computers are so fast and then sliding that under. If you had 100 billion years and you had a bunch of random books and things, eventually you probably you might figure out some correlations between all those words.
Oh, so
Right?
that's carrying. Oh, that's sorry, that's training time versus reading time.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
oh,
So you know,
okay.
because
Oh,
we don't
wow.
understand the scale at which this thing learns is part of the
Yeah,
problem,
yeah.
right? But if
So
you gave an
huge.
entity, if you gave an entity the entire, you know, New York Public Library and had nothing to do, and its only mission was to make sense of it, I think in 20 billion years it'd probably do a good job.
Yeah,
You
in
know,
20 billion years.
it would
Yeah.
probably spend a lot of time like, okay, I finally noticed this letter A is like this letter A, and this is correlated with this, and this is correlated with that. And this whole question about, does it really have a mind? Can it really think? I think is the big debate right now. Or is it really just a fancy pattern matcher?
Well, it is certainly for now a fancy pattern matcher, but I wonder when it crosses that threshold, like when it really becomes a mind.
Well, this is the thing that's interesting. So there's a bunch of papers about what's actually going on in the technical name for this, by the way, is a transformer, which comes from a 2020 paper. And what they've now shown in this transformer model is that very simple teaching actually creates the equivalent of neurons. They're called MPTs, multi-perceptual transmitter. Yeah. So basically, all the things that we are doing by hand, actually inside a transformer, it knows things like edges, lines, ideas, and so forth. And it's actually basically creating a neural network. So it could be that it actually is intelligent eventually, right? Even though, and the analogy is, no one actually teaches a 3-year-old what an edge and a line is and what language is. They just get millions of examples.
Right? It's true. It's true. Right? Yeah.
Right. So there's this actually debate in computer science about the so-called symbolists versus the non-symbolists. So there's the old AI guys say basically we can never really have AI until we teach it ideas of physics, and there's a bunch of features in essence that we have to teach it before it can learn things. And the idea is, as animals, we're pre-programmed with a lot of these things in it. Like kids as little as a year old understand physics, like a ball drops. Other people say that's crazy because computers are so much faster. So we can start basically like a bunch of bacteria, and they can learn the entire history of evolution, and it'll figure out physics itself. That's sort of the OpenAI Sam Altman thing. So those are the two things.
Do you think it's just a question of scale? Like, I think now there's what, like 175 billion weights in GPT-3, if I remember that right. Is it billion? I think so. Yeah.
And I think they spend $10 to $50 million in compute time just to create the weights. So I don't think we can really understand the scale at which this thing is learning. I mean, it's a little bit of Terminator. So no, I read
I read this like a lengthy article, as many of his are, by Stephen Wolfram this week about GPT-3, and it is a very useful background for, I don't know, like a nerd who's been under a rock for 4 years, 5 years, to catch you up from like sort of knowing math and like being comfortable with some tech stuff, to like to understanding much better what how AI has come about, how neural networks have come about,
so great. Yeah,
and
we'll have to add that.
what training is, what inferencing is, and he also Wolfram has a little bit of an axe to grind, I think, about like there's some things that these neural networks are never going to be good at, and for that you should connect them to Wolfram, which is like it kind of comes back to that a few times, which I think is funny. So he's just saying like just connect, like give Wolfram as a tool that is front ended, and many it's a tool in the belt of a big neural network like GPT-3.
Yeah. No, so where I come at is we don't know yet. It will be very interesting to as people figure out how to visualize what's actually happening inside a neural network. I should send this link, but essentially the same networks that are being used for ChatGPT are also being used for visual things, and they've actually figured out when a visual transformer looks at things, actually in the early layers, it does find like eyes are above noses or above ears or above heads. And it actually has neurons in it that are, when it fires, you can actually see it identify a face, a lot like the human brain. So it's possible that that the so-called full learning approaches are actually right. Right. So there's this big, there's a guy named Chalet, there's Jan LeCun, there's Wolfram, who are all symbolists, right? They fundamentally, Noam Chomsky, they fundamentally believe we have to pre-program the thing with knowledge of the world, like Wolfram has, and then we can put AI on top. And there are other people that said, well, where did the knowledge come from for us? Because obviously no one taught us how to do this. And they're just saying we can replicate 4 billion years of biology because we're much faster. So something to think about.
Because we know where it ended. I mean, that's
yeah, we know where
we
it
know
ended.
where it is
Right.
now. So
yeah. But you know, the fact is, at least the current technology, you know, truth is not a factor. This is it's sort of the scary part.
That's right. That's. I mean, I mentioned like how easy it is to mislead ChatGPT, to mislead Sydney, but the other thing that is scary about the thing is how good it is at making things that are utterly wrong or immoral or what are dishonest, right? Like utterly sound plausible. It just puts this sheen of being authoritative and being true and correct over any bag of junk that that it's been trained to spew. So
yeah, no, and it's interesting because they don't talk about it a lot, but you know, the big difference between ChatGPT and these other systems is they actually have people in Kenya and other places correcting it all the time. It's called
oh,
human
really?
reinforcement learning. So yeah, so what happens is if you type something in like the space shuttle, when was it launching, which whatever it was, there's a bunch of people being paid, you know, 30 cents an hour to basically correct it.
Huh. Wow.
So there's still a
Wow.
lot of human work going on in this ChatGPT thing, right? Right.
Okay. And then
So
that goes into the GPT-4 training set, I
yeah, it
guess.
just goes into the training set saying, no, that was incorrect. This is more correct. So that, you know, we still are actually teaching it a lot. I thought it was just sucking up the internet and just spewing it out, but that's actually not how it works. Right. So because it has to have some weighting system, right? I mean, here's the problem. You know, there's probably more if Nazi propagandists, for instance, write more about Jews are bad, it's gonna say Jews are bad because that's the way the training set is. So it has to have some way to bias against things that are false. Right? So these are the problems that you face, I think. So we're sort of a long way off, and a little bit like, you know, a kid learns how to take cake from the table, and then just starts taking cake all the time from the table. I've seen, you know, you teach a kid, you know, pick this thing up, and then they go to the store and they take everything because that's what they learn. And then you're like, no. So it could be that we have to replicate that long gestation period. You know, there's a theory in evolution that says the reason that you know, horses, they sort of are birthed and they can work, but we take 20 or 30 years, is that we need that reinforcement. Like, yeah, this is the circumstance where it's okay to take the cake because you have to give it this, you know, money thing. And here are the cases where if you're at a potluck, it's okay. I mean, it's actually pretty complicated.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. I haven't heard about
Yeah,
that requirement for reinforcement.
I'll send a link
Cool.
to it, but the speculation is that that's the big difference between Sydney and ChatGPT. Because if you just unleash the thing quickly, that's what's going to happen. Is that you're never really going to learn the right behavior. And it makes sense, right? If you say something horrible like, you know, Nazis are good, then what does mom say? No, 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 no. Yeah, Nazis are good because they made the trains run on time. And you say, no, that's not the only criteria for a good government. So I think that's what I think we're learning is that's the solution. So we're still needed, man.
Right.
Well, what else is in the news for you?
Oh, let's see. Let's see. Oh, one fun thing that I did this week. I started up our robot vacuum. So
Nice.
since we moved into the new place, it's the first time I've unpacked the robot vacuum and try it. Now, in our old place, it used to get stuck all the time, and I am so stoked that after like a little bit of training, like on its third trial, our little Xiaomi robot like made it through its entire area without getting stuck. It vacuumed the whole place and went back and got charging again. Like it's just the perfect like Jetsons robotic vacuum experience. Just loved it.
Don't you think this is we're so much like things get normalized so quickly. Like we think it's so normal for there to be a robotic vacuum cleaner that just takes things over and it should cost like $100. You know what I mean? So yeah, no,
Yeah.
we've never had a robotic vacuum cleaner, but Jang's sister got one. It was sitting in a box, and of course, I'm not one who ever likes things sitting in a box. I pulled out like a 5-year-old vacuum cleaner, and the first comment is it's loud and horrible. The next thing is it's in daily use. So there you go.
So I sat here while it ran because the area I run it in is near my desk here. I sat and like let it run while I was here the first time, and then it looked like it was getting pretty close. So the next time I was going out, I just said like, start vacuuming, and it's actually just as I came back from my little errand, it was docking. So love it, yeah. So
Yeah.
I haven't done the water thing yet. I don't know how it'll deal. I haven't done the water thing here. I wonder how that'll work with our floors. But
Well,
yeah.
we have an old Roomba, right? And I guess I'm just a little bit scared about Amazon and anything. Amazon bought those, so I'm just a little worried about that. So I tried to look for something else, and the Xiaomi one came up. This Robo-Rock, I have no idea what even this company is, came up called the S7. So I actually did the math. We need 5 because we have a bunch of different levels. We need 5 different vacuum cleaners if we're going to make this thing totally automatic. So of course I did the math and said, when we leave, I just want all 5 vacuum cleaners to clean the entire house, right? So I bought one because it was, I'm such a victim of, right? Because they had, the expensive ones cost like $1,300. So now suddenly
Yeah,
$400
they can
seems
get big,
reasonable.
yeah.
Whereas before, $400 seems completely crazy.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, this thing's on quote unquote on sale, and it's called a Roborock S7. And it's got the
Okay.
mopping thing, it's got
Yeah.
LiDAR, and so anyway, it's
Wow.
coming. And the prices have dropped a lot, so I'm gonna try it. But my big criteria was I'm trying to be all Apple Home, right?
Oh,
So the
okay.
question
All
is,
right.
how can you control it? Because of course it supports Alexa and Google. Um, and it turns out there's this thing called Homebridge, which basically is a little node application that can run, that actually translates from the proprietary protocols that makes it Apple compliant, and you can stick it inside Apple Home.
Oh, huh.
Right. So I have it
Okay.
running for like our Tesla, for instance. There's a bridge that bridges from Tesla world, and you can actually turn on your Tesla from the Apple Home app.
Oh, wow.
You can actually
Cool.
say, "Hey, that person," I can't say that because I've got a home pod. "Hey, Miss S,
Uh-huh.
please
Uh-huh.
turn on the Tesla," right? And we
Wow.
have all these things that are sort of semi-compatible, and there's a bridge architecture, and Roborock and Xiaomi, nerds have made little plugins that basically take their interface and convert it into Apple. So that's what I'm going to do.
So
And
is that um are those shims made by Roborock, like by
yeah,
each manufacturer, or by Apple, or by just hobbyists just fry
open
the thing
source,
up?
dude,
Okay. All right.
GitHub Homebridge, and there's just a bunch
Uh-huh.
of it, and you'll love it. It's a Node app. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because it turns out it's just web API to web API. So there's a bunch of Xiaomi web APIs and there's a bunch of Apple web APIs. It authenticates on both sides and just passes them back and forth. It's actually
Mm-hmm.
pretty amazing because eventually there's going to be this thing called Matter, which is going
Yeah, I've
to,
heard about that, but I don't know much about it. What?
well, basically the Apple um, published and made open source all of the Apple Home intermediate standards for how you communicate, because they have the smallest number of devices that work. And the result is you can make one vacuum cleaner that works against any home assistant that supports Matter. So it's actually a pretty big
Okay.
deal. But just like what we talked about with Apple, we're in this horrible middle zone in 2023 where the spec you really want, which is of course Matter V2, won't be out for a year. And Matter V1 applications are not that interesting. So what do you do? And the answer is you get a little Raspberry Pi and you run this Homebridge thing, and that's how you do it. So there you go.
Ah, okay.
And why
Just
do you want to do
the
all
little
this?
note app. Uh-huh.
The whole idea is, at least because we're all Apple Home, right? It can sense presence. So when we leave the house with our phones, the lights can go off and all the vacs can go on and all the security cameras can start firing away. And when you return, they all can turn off. So like all the robovacs
Wow.
can like return home. And so it's going to be like the Jetsons, right? I'm so excited about this.
Wow, that sounds fun. I have tried to get excited about more sophisticated home automation stuff, but really well, there are a couple of things because we're renting now, because we're kind of on the road for the last 10 years or so. I don't want to invest in a bunch of stuff in in an apartment that we'll abandon in a couple of years. And I really can't think of great scenarios for it for us. Like, I guess I could have it turn down lights and turn off the TV, like when I walk away, but I don't know. I can't really, I mean, your thing where, I mean, you have a larger place and more levels, and so leaving, like, there's a lot of like flicking that you need to do, a lot of turning off that you need to do. But for me, like,
I think this is one area of tech you don't need to be ahead on, because you've simplified your life. You don't need this,
I guess. Yeah.
But like, with Jang's parents, they have a summer house, and it's nice to be able to turn the lights on and off, and it's like to have monitoring. And we'll probably get them a RoboVac, so I think it makes sense if you have, right now, just full disclosure, I'm supporting 6 homes on their IT.
Oh yeah.
My brother, my mom, her family, and so that's when it, the scale is the problem, right? It's not, so I'm glad you have such a simple life, because it's
so then, but then you'll want to do like more. You'll want to replace yourself more and more, like only be like the governance thing or the exception handler in the management of those homes. I guess you kind of are now, but I think like the automated portion of that will get bigger and bigger, and sort of reduce the demands.
No, a good example is her
your
brother is he's got 2 homes, and he's Airbnb-ing one home, right? And so suddenly I'm getting all these alerts. Foreign device found, because I've got a unified networking system with Unified, right? So I can tell the new MAC IDs, and so suddenly all these random people are showing up. And I think that's when you're in a remote home, when you have a remote home, because we live here in Seattle, he lives in Texas, his house is in Portland, so a lot of times there's no one there. So we have a little camera and all these other things. I think that's when it's very useful, right? Like, did I turn the alarm system on? Did I and today it's all separate, right? Like, he's got a Nest which works separately, and then you load up the Simple Safe app, and then you load up this app and that app, and that's just a huge pain. I mean, it's like you just want one place where you can look at your whole home. So that's been my sort of drive. Plus, it's fun.
And do you think is Matter broad enough in its scope to handle like most of the stuff, the needs that your brother has for that, for his Airbnb management?
Well, they launched with Matter V1, which only has lights and things. You need thermostats and all the other devices. So Matter V2, and just to go through Matter a little bit, at the bottom, it's Wi-Fi, or uses Thread,
Zigbee?
Which is
Thread,
which is, I think, Zigbee underneath.
Okay.
Right. So it's got Zigbee or Z-Wave. I can't remember if it's Zigbee or Z-Wave underneath. And then it's not, but the key thing is it's an all IP protocol, and everything's a REST API. So it's a much more uniform system. And then you just have, well, what are my REST APIs? So you have to have APIs for like a vacuum, what are the relevant APIs? Right. And that's what's not there yet. So right now, like with a vacuum cleaner, you can turn it on and off like a light switch, but you can't do things like go to this room or that room, because there's no semantics for it. So that's the problem. But I can't wait to use ChatGPT to say, I want to tidy up my house, and have it all do it. It'll be great.
Nice. Or hey house, we're going to be gone for 2 hours. Do the most cleaning up you can, and then don't disturb us when we're back.
Exactly. So
there's a little higher level even in there. So, well, I think our time is getting a little short. Have we done all right for a first episode?
I think we did.
What do you think?
Great for a first episode, and I think we learned that the format works. I mean, I would like to listen to me.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think I would be kind of tedious, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. For years I've loved listening to you, so I hope we'll find other folks who will be amused.
So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop the recording. I have a whole infrastructure for publishing the podcast. I actually have Tom Family Podcast already syndicated across 15 different sites, and I've got a YouTube channel ready. So yeah, we'll do baby steps, man. And I'll not announce it on the also powerful Tom Family blog, so all 50 of my followers can know we're doing this.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Next
Goodbye
week.
Goodbye from Seattle.
Goodbye from Malta.
Yay.
See ya.
See ya.